Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Duncan, President and CEO of Battelle for Kids. Welcome to our third Futurecast conversation. We've been hosting these to dig deeper into our recent release special report, The Future of the Portrait of a Graduate, which is open to broad and necessary discussion on how we can better prepare every student to be future ready. I invite you to check out our previous conversations with Tim Taylor from America Succeeds and Dr. Bill Daggett from the Successful Practices Network. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce our guest, Catherine Truitt, the State Superintendent for the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Catherine has been a dedicated advocate for improving education outcomes and empowering students to be future ready. With a deep background in the classroom teaching, higher education, and policy, she has led transformational initiatives in North Carolina, including the statewide development of the Portrait of a Graduate, which Battelle for Kids proudly supported. Under her leadership, the state is taking bold steps to align learning experiences with the academic knowledge and durable skills that students need to thrive in a rapidly changing world. Welcome, Catherine. We're so excited to have you today. So I'm going to start with a big question. Why the portrait? Why now?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm really excited that we're having this opportunity to talk about this topic because it is one of my favorites. I think the answer to the question, why the portrait, why now, is that how we go about the day-to-day business of educating kids in the United States really hasn't changed much or evolved to meet 21st century needs. And I think this fact has always inspired me to want to pursue important system reforms, and I think all of us who work in education could say that this is especially true coming out of the pandemic. So it goes without saying that our education system is built on this century-old model, originally designed to encourage people to work in a farm or a factory. And while those jobs are still really important today, in fact, agriculture is the number one industry in North Carolina still, they look so different than they did 120 years ago. And there's so many more opportunities and careers necessary to keep our country and our economy moving that people couldn't have even thought of 120 years ago. And I would argue that so many marketplace evolutions are changing before K-12 education can catch up. And, what's happening with AI or even the cell phone conversations right now that educators are having, this debate between legislatures, educators, systems, and parents about whether or not we should ban cell phones. This is finally catching up to us, and even though cell phones have been around for so long. So when I came into office 4 years ago at the height of the pandemic, there was an appetite for change, and I knew that we needed to leverage the circumstances of the pandemic and that appetite for change to look at things differently in education, in a way that would better serve the needs of students. And for me, when I think about what education is doing to serve the needs of the students, at the end of the day, that is all about preparing kids for the post-secondary plans of their choice. And I would say that, our accountability model does not hold schools accountable for doing that. I think that a really kind of unpopular thing to say these days is that we have a diploma integrity problem in our country. So in other words, we've got really high numbers of high school graduation rates and really low numbers of kids graduating prepared for life after high school as defined by proficiency in reading and math, such that, kids are not even scoring high enough on military entrance exams so that they can enlist in the Army or the Navy or Air Force or Marines. So looking at workforce readiness became a huge focus of mine. Some of your listeners may know that prior to running for this position, even though I started my education as a high school English teacher, I eventually became the chancellor of nonprofit Western Governors University, which is an online university that serves adults who were largely not successful the first time around in pursuing a post-secondary degree. And when meeting our students who are, in their 40s, coming back to school, trying to get a credential so they can get ahead in life and be there for their families, really caused me to think about K-12 education a little bit differently. And so this kind of all came to a head and became real for me when I started talking with my team about the fact that North Carolina didn't have a portrait of a graduate. So we decided that was really our first step in kind of putting a stake in the ground and saying, this is important to us. And so that's where Battelle for Kids comes in, and the rest is history.
And Catherine, it seems, when we've see the work that's happened in North Carolina, I would be interested in hearing from you, like, what business and industries did you hear from? What were business leaders saying to you as you started socializing this idea?
Well, yeah, because of my time at Western Governors University and my connection to workforce development in the state, both with the North Carolina Chamber statewide and with local workforce development boards, I kind of knew what the business community was saying, and that's no different in North Carolina than it is anywhere else in the United States, which is we're having trouble getting good workers who are ready to go, like folks who have employability skills, or sometimes they're called soft skills. Of course, we like to call them durable skills. But these employability skills are lacking in so many employees. And so I think, particularly in North Carolina, I was looking at IT and seeing that we were leaving tens of thousands of jobs in IT on the table every year, going unfilled. We have a lot of advanced manufacturing in North Carolina, a lot of a nursing shortage. So I think there's a lot of employment opportunity in North Carolina. We are regularly deemed number 1 for business or number 2 for business in the country. But, a state loses that ranking if they can't provide the workforce. And the other thing that was guiding our thinking on this and this is something that every state leader should know about their state, is what percentage of students are attaining any kind of post-secondary credential after high school before the age of 24. Because in North Carolina, it's only about a third. And so that says to me that we have too many kids graduating from high school without a plan. High school graduation cannot be seen as the end. And I think so often for some of our students and their families, it is. It's such a great goal, but there has to be something after that. And we know in North Carolina that something like 72% of kids their junior year of high school state that they intend to enroll in either a 2-year or a 4-year institution after high school. But really, it's like half of that actually do. So, I think that thinking about workforce readiness in that very deliberate way is it was something that we needed to do. And to your point, employers were asking us to do that. And so in partnering in particular with the North Carolina Chamber, they were very excited about participating in the coming together of this portrait of a graduate.
I think that's been one of the really exciting things as we've followed your journey, is how supportive and encouraging and involved the business community has been from the very beginning. And I recently read a study, I believe, from the Council for Aid to Education, that cited that 57% of students leaving high school lack basic skills, basic abilities to think critically, problem solve, and communicate effectively. And then I believe 50% of young people exiting baccalaureate degrees still possess a deficit in those three critical workforce related durable skills. And so I'm really fascinated with what was the, as you started this work, how did higher ed respond? Because it seems like you got a ton of support from the business community that were saying, hey, there's a skill gap here. We would
Yeah.
love your help. How did higher ed respond?
Well, I think certainly our community colleges, which we consider to be the economic engine of North Carolina, we have the third largest community college system in the country.
Oh, wow.
We absolutely got buy-in from our community college partners. I think that when we started partnering with Battelle for Kids, Battelle helped us really implement the goal of getting this portrait together by working regionally across the state. So we're a pretty big state in North Carolina. And so breaking down this work into regions was critical, and that allowed local community colleges to play a role. And I think that that having their buy-in was essential.
Yeah. So as you guys were working through this, what was the biggest surprise that you uncovered? I would say surprise and or challenge as you started engaging the state around a portrait of a graduate.
Well, I think you know when we I think the biggest challenge has been that while everyone is certainly in love with our seven competencies, our seven durable skills, um, it, it's fair to say that no state has figured out how to measure the a student's use of these skills with reliability and validity, what we would expect from, and what we need from our assessments. We are fortunately participating in, we are part of a grant, a multi-state grant, through USED. It's a student assessment grant, and we're working with the Carnegie Foundation, and ETS and JAL to figure out once and for all how we can measure these durable skills with validity and reliability. So I think that's one challenge. And another challenge that, anyone who embarks in this work has to remember is that, chances are state leaders are not going to be able to mandate that districts use the work and adopt the competencies. I would say close to half of districts in our state have adopted the portrait and all of the assets and resources that come along with it. And I think that pretty soon we'll get to that critical tipping point where more people are using it than not, and it will go from there. But there's just so many competing things that districts are worried about right now with,
Right.
Chronic absenteeism being one of them, which is kind of ironic because this, I see the portrait and all of the work that we're doing with it as a way to mitigate chronic absenteeism, because it makes, especially in high schools, where some teenagers are not finding value in going to school every day, or they're not finding relevance in it. And this certainly, I think, would help with that.
And it's really interesting that you say that, Catherine. We've been inside Battelle for Kids. We've been talking a lot about the ideas of hope and resilience, and how the portrait is a catalyst to create a culture of hope and resilience with young people. And
Yeah.
and through building hope and resilience is this idea of creating opportunities for young people to find joy and meaning in their learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's shifting the conversation away from engagement into motivation. And so
Mm-hmm.
how is the learning environment joyful for our young people, where they have some voice and choice in their learning, but then also meaningly relevant to their future? And so this idea of hope being about the future self, but creating a learning environment that's characterized by some productive struggle that allows students to be more self-directed, that builds resilience in the present self, that creates that resilience to be able to think about the future in a really hopeful and meaningful way. And I would just love to hear, what are you hearing from teachers in North Carolina about the impact of the portrait, and the in what must change insofar as the instructional environment?
Well, that's a very big question. I mean, I think that going back to your comments, I don't know that you can have that hope unless you see the relevance first.
Right.
And I think about my own children, one of whom is still in high school, and the extent to which in their public schools they found relevance. I think that what they found relevance in was their grade point average and checking the boxes that you need to graduate from high school, because that's really what high school is in America. It's an exercise in checking boxes, meeting state requirements. And of course, they found relevance in their extracurricular activities,
That's right.
which is
Yeah.
where you hone employability skills or
That's
durable
right.
skills.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I I think that what's what's so daunting about all of this is that it really comes down to individual teachers right now.
Yeah.
Teachers have so much autonomy. Some teachers are subject to a lot of accountability if they teach a tested subject, and some are not. And I think that autonomy um, is what fuels a lot of teachers. I mean, Daniel Pink's book says that's what drives us as humans, right? Is that need for autonomy and purpose.
That's right.
But sometimes when you have too much autonomy, you lose sight of the bigger picture. And I think education is kind of a perfect storm that way, because it's so easy. I mean, I was guilty of this when I was an English teacher. Is you get really focused on covering the standards, preparing for the test, getting through the junior English paper, and again, it becomes an exercise in checking boxes. And I don't pretend to have the answers for how we change education in that way, but I do know that having a portrait that is designed to be relevant because it is aligned to workforce is the first step.
Yeah, absolutely. So where's this going in North Carolina? So you've got a great start. You guys have just empowered local districts to engage your statewide portrait. The higher ed's in, business leaders are in. Where's this going, and what's your hope for the impact of the portrait in the long term?
Well, I'm really proud of all of those things that you just said. I I think one of the things that has to happen is that this has to somehow become part of our state accountability model. Because you're right, we do have a lot of local superintendents who have embedded this into their strategic plans for their district. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
The idea that kids are going to start their public school experience as 5 and 6 year olds and come be exposed to employability skills is really incredible. Um, and I think in order for it to truly take root, that it has to be something that gets measured and that schools are held accountable for. And right now, it's not a part of our state accountability model. I think, that's a really big change for the legislature to kind of get their heads around.
Yeah.
And we certainly were working in that direction all last year, but we're not there yet, and we're going to have a leadership change, this winter at the Department of Public Instruction. So I certainly hope that whoever is in this role next year is going to continue to want to build on the success of the portrait, all of its assets. The legislation that we did get passed last year that requires all middle school students to have a career development plan is so perfectly aligned to the portrait that kind of gives me hope that that districts will continue to build on this work in a way that is just really meaningful to students and their families.
And Catherine, you elevated this really interesting point around measurement and accountability. And for other state school chiefs that are thinking about moving in this direction, or even local superintendents, like what advice would you give them as they're thinking about measurement versus accountability or
To local superintendents?
or state chiefs? Like what advice would you give them based on your
Well,
experience right now?
I will tell you that one of the best things that I did when I took office as a state chief is that I hired someone to serve as my advisor on workforce engagement. So I created a direct report to me who thinks about nothing except workforce engagement aligned to K-12 education. And that means that, she can be that person who is out there representing me. So there's two of us, double trouble, talking about the fact that K-12 education needs to be better aligned with what is going to happen to students after high school. I think that's critical in putting your money where your mouth is and showing the legislature and showing local superintendents that this is really important. So I think that's one key piece of advice. I also think that anything that a state does needs to be grassroots. It can't be from the top down. And having grassroots involvement from parents, teachers, higher ed, employers, faith-based communities, that is, I think, that was part of our secret sauce.
Yeah.
Was having as many people touch this as possible. So yeah, I think that having those two things, creating a grassroots movement and then having people who are really spending a lot of time thinking about how this plays out are critical.
Yeah. Is there a demand signal that you would hope to see from the field that would signal to legislators that it's time to codify this into the accountability system? And I know that's a huge question. It's a very complex question. And if so, what might that be?
Yeah, that's a very good question, because we know, the demand signal is already there to change the accountability model away from what it is right now, which is overly reliant on high stakes one and done testing.
Right.
We cannot continue, and I don't know that there's any educators who would disagree with the statement. We cannot continue to define school quality and student success in this very narrow measurement. We don't need to do away with high stakes testing. We still need to know who is proficient and which teachers are growing students, but we certainly should not be assigning a letter grade to a school only based on how many students are proficient and what kind of growth teachers have gotten. So I think that signal is already there in a way. But there are a lot of states that have moved into this kind of multi-measure approach to the school performance grade. I think chronic absenteeism should be one of the measurements that schools are being measured against. And I think that the extent to which schools expect that students should be thinking about their future before they get to high school is doable and incredibly important.
I reflect back on my experience as superintendent and integrating the portrait, and I remember the conversations with K-1-2 teachers about those competencies and about it being a portrait of a graduate, and how this wasn't relevant to them because they were teaching students, how to read, how to write, how to develop number sense and basic mathematical arithmetic. And so I remember the moment in which the teachers started coming to me saying, hey, with the right scaffolding, they can think critically. With the right frames, they can think creatively. And I would just be interested, because a lot of times people think that this portrait journey really is about the high school.
Right.
And at Battelle for Kids, we say that the portrait is a catalyst for K-12 instructional transformation. And what would you say to the early childhood teachers out there that are, they have this mandate for literacy and numeracy, which we know is fundamental and foundational, and we don't want to take them off that point. But
Yeah.
what would you say to those K-1-2 teachers that say, no, that's not for me, that's for the high school teachers?
Well, first of all, I think that the from a practical standpoint, you have to make this work as easy for teachers as possible for all the reasons that you just mentioned. So you have to show them how it's relevant, and you have to you can't make this one more thing for teachers to do, which is why we worked with Battelle to create all of the resources that we have, and that the lesson plans that we've created with the performance tasks are aligned to the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. But as far as the getting teachers to really see, especially in those early grades, why this is so important, I think that teachers talk to kids at all ages about what they want to be when they grow up.
Right.
I've been to elementary schools that have career fairs, which I think is incredible, where they literally are having kindergarten through fifth graders wander from table to table talking to adults about what they do in their life every day. We all know that that in order to be it, you have to see it. So I think that that helping teachers understand that we're talking about weaving things in to create relevancy, not bolting on, is critical, and that all students deserve the chance and the opportunity to start thinking about who they want to be someday. And I think that my suspicion is that it wouldn't take much to get a first grade teacher to understand why that's important. And having a portrait in place that is accessible to all students in all grades is key.
Yeah. Catherine, you mentioned the statewide performance task, and that's something that we're really proud to have partnered with you guys on that. And I would love if you just share with our listeners a little bit about that process and what you were aiming for with the performance task. We often talk about the current accountability system is based on what students know, and now you're balancing the equation by saying, well, this is what students can do with what they know. And I would love for you just to speak a little bit to the performance task and where you hope to see that grow in the future.
So I think it would be good for your listeners to understand how we broke down the work. So we created 3 phases. So in the first phase, we worked, as I mentioned, grassroots across the entire state to identify the 7 durable skills that we saw as bridging the gap between what schools are teaching and the skills and qualities that employers in our state are seeking. Another way to say that would be the skills and competencies that all students need to be successful in whatever they do when they graduate from high school. So in the second phase, we created resources that would allow teachers to immediately integrate the 7 durable skills into the classroom. So we worked with teachers across the state to develop rubrics that support teachers and administrators in identifying and integrating durable skills into their classrooms and daily lesson plans. Then the third phase, which was finished earlier this summer, we took it a step further, and we designed activities or performance tasks that are kind of like lesson plans that expose students to the durable skills in hands-on ways. So again, worked with teachers to design the activities with an emphasis on making sure that students could make real-world connections to the durable skills. So we're talking about helping students engage, explore, and experience the durable skills in action, what we call content in context. So I think that, going back to your question about how do you convince a first grade teacher that this is important, I can think of no better classroom management tool than having all of my students seeing the relevance in school.
Yeah, exactly. So, Catherine, you're ending your tenure as the state school superintendent of public instruction in North Carolina. You are leaving an incredible legacy of courageous leadership. And I would just like to give you a few minutes to say whatever you would like to say.
Oh, that's so kind. Well, I first of all, I want to thank Battelle for Kids for being such an incredible partner to us. Any state chief will tell you it's not always easy to find trusted partners, and having a trusted partner is key to making this work. So thank you to you and your team. I think that, change is hard. But I think that we are at a critical juncture in public education. I think that public education needs to evolve. That, as I said at the outset of our interview, it needs to evolve more quickly. It needs to become more agile, and it needs to evolve in a way and become more agile in a way that is aligned to what's happening to our students during school and after school. And so I think that it's critical that leaders, whether in a legislature, at the state level, district level, or building level, get comfortable with thinking about how things can look different. And I tell you, the pandemic really shed some light on how relevant school is or not. Whether it's, our assessment systems, the checkbox that I mentioned with high school graduation, chronic absenteeism and kids still not returning to school, the way they did prior to the pandemic. So I'm hopeful that the pandemic will continue to be sort of a catalyst for change, and that people who have the ability to do so will push for the changes that need to be made so that all students have a chance to be successful in the post-secondary plans of their choice.
Catherine, I'm so grateful for this partnership that we've had with you and your team. You guys have been just a joy to work with. It has really just been a fabulous experience for us at Battelle for Kids, and we're so thankful for your trust in us and letting us partner with you on this important work. And again, so thankful for your courageous leadership and the partnership. And we all wish you the best in all the things that we know you'll continue to do. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's the Mutual Admiration Society.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.